Man following the general. You're under oath as United States Marines. Have you forgotten that? He was Kyle Ree fighting a Terminator. He was Corporal Hicks protecting Ripley from aliens. He was Johnny Ringo facing down Doc Holliday. Then suddenly the big roles stopped coming. The man who seemed destined for superstardom disappeared from Hollywood's A-list. So what really happened to Michael Biehn? From Alabama to Arizona. Michael Connell Biehn was born on July 31, 1956 in Anniston, Alabama. He was the second of three boys born to Don Biehn, a lawyer, and Marcia Connell. His surname is German, pronounced Bean or Bean, depending on who's asking. When Michael was young, the family moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. At age 14, they moved again, this time to Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Lake Havasu was where Michael discovered acting. He joined the high school drama club and found something that felt right. He was good at it, good enough to win a drama scholarship to the University of Arizona. He studied there for 2 years, but the pull of Hollywood was too strong. At age 20, Michael left college early to pursue acting in Los Angeles. It was a gamble. Most young actors who moved to Hollywood with dreams never make it. Michael had talent, but talent alone doesn't guarantee anything. His first role was tiny. He appeared in 2 scenes of Grease in 1978. In one scene, John Travolta's character Danny hits Michael's uncredited character in the stomach during a basketball game. You probably don't remember him. That's how small the part was, but it was a start. Shortly after, he had a role in a made-for-television movie called A Fire in the Sky in 1978. In 1981, the first real breakthrough arrived, but not the kind anyone expected. Michael Biehn stepped into his first leading role as a dangerously unhinged stalker in the psychological thriller The Fan, sharing the screen with the legendary Lauren Bacall. For a rising actor, it was more than just a role, it was a masterclass. Bacall didn't just co-star, she took him under her wing, later becoming his acting teacher and quietly shaping the discipline behind his intensity. And intensity was exactly what audiences began to notice. There was something raw, something controlled yet unpredictable in his performances that made him impossible to ignore. By 1983, he continued building momentum with a role in The Lords of Discipline, portraying a military cadet with a quiet edge. It wasn't a breakout moment, but it was important. It sharpened a persona that would come to define much of his career. The soldier, the survivor, the man under pressure. Still, despite the steady work and growing skill, true recognition remained just out of reach. He was close, but not quite there. Then came the moment that would change everything. In 1984, Michael walked into an audition for a small science fiction project that few believed in. The film was The Terminator, directed by a relatively unknown filmmaker named James Cameron. Even the casting didn't scream blockbuster. Its lead was Arnold Schwarzenegger, an action star still on the rise. Nothing about it suggested history in the making. And yet, this unlikely project would become the turning point, the moment where everything shifted, and Michael Biehn's path toward cinematic immortality truly began. What looked like a small, almost forgettable production would soon become a defining moment, but at the time, nothing about it felt certain. The Terminator was made on a modest budget of around $6.4 million, surprisingly low even by 1984 standards. And for Michael Biehn, landing the role wasn't guaranteed. In fact, he nearly lost it. At his first audition, he walked in still carrying a southern accent from a stage tryout for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. It didn't fit the vision. The producers feared that giving Kyle Reese a regional tone would limit the character's universality, and just like that, the opportunity almost slipped away. But sometimes, all it takes is one more chance. His agent pushed for a second audition, and this time, everything changed. Michael delivered exactly what they needed: focused, intense, unforgettable. He secured the role of Kyle Reese, a battle-scarred soldier sent back through time to protect Sarah Connor from an unstoppable machine. What followed was a production that pushed boundaries in every sense. Filmed quickly and on a tight budget, the movie relied on raw energy rather than polished safety. During high-speed night shoots through Los Angeles, the adrenaline ran so high that, in one surreal moment, Michael actually ripped the steering wheel off the car mid-chase, then turned to Linda Hamilton and casually told her to take over. It was chaotic, risky, and real in a way big-budget films rarely dared to be. When the film premiered in October 1984, expectations were modest, but the reaction was anything but. The Terminator exploded into a surprise hit, pulling in $78 million worldwide and earning critical acclaim. Audiences were captivated, critics were impressed, and suddenly, the small film no one believed in had become a cultural phenomenon. And at the center of it all was Michael Biehn, a performance that proved he wasn't just part of the story, but a force within it. Audiences didn't just enjoy the Terminator, they connected with it. And at the heart of that connection was Michael Biehn. Almost overnight, he became a recognizable name, the emotional core of a story driven by chaos and machines. His portrayal of Kyle Reese struck a rare balance, vulnerable yet resilient, yet unbreakable. It was the kind of performance that usually launches a full-fledged Hollywood star. But Michael didn't see his path that way. Fame, for him, was never the goal. He later admitted he wasn't even particularly excited about working alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger at the time. His ambitions leaned elsewhere, toward the depth and intensity of actors like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. He wanted to be respected for his craft, not boxed into the image of an action star. That mindset, prioritizing the work over the spotlight, quietly shaped every decision that followed, even if it meant stepping away from the kind of fame others chased relentlessly. Then came what seemed like the perfect continuation. After the success of The Terminator, director James Cameron began developing a sequel to Alien, originally directed by Ridley Scott. The new film, Aliens, featured a role that seemed tailor-made for Michael, a Marine corporal named Dwayne Hicks. He wanted it badly. After all, he had already proven himself to Cameron. It felt like a natural next step. But Hollywood rarely follows expectations. Word reached Michael that Cameron was considering a different direction, and soon enough, the role was given to James Remar. Production began without him. For Michael, it was a quiet but sharp disappointment, one of those moments where momentum seems to slip just out of reach. He moved on, accepting the decision, unaware that fate wasn't quite finished rewriting this particular chapter of his story. Then, without warning, everything shifted again. James Remar was suddenly let go shortly after production on Aliens had already begun. Director James Cameron needed a replacement immediately, someone who could step into the chaos without the benefit of weeks of military-style training the rest of the cast had already completed. More importantly, he needed someone he trusted. So he made the call to Michael Biehn. Did he want to play Hicks? Within days, Michael was on a flight to England, stepping straight into one of the most intense productions of his career. Because of the last-minute casting, he didn't have the same preparation or personalization as the others. While the rest of the cast had tailored their combat gear, Michael was handed a pre-made design, complete with a padlock heart motif on the armor. He hated it. Joking that it looked like a giant bullseye painted on his chest, he refused to wear it, pushing back even as he scrambled to catch up with the demanding shoot. And this time, the scale was bigger. With a budget of around $18.5 million, Aliens was a far more ambitious production than The Terminator, raising the stakes in every possible way. On set, Michael found himself working alongside Sigourney Weaver, who was returning as Ellen Ripley. Interestingly, she hadn't even seen The Terminator. Her 1984 had been consumed by a Broadway production and her own wedding, causing her to miss its theatrical run entirely. That made Michael an unexpected bridge between her and Cameron's world. He shared what he knew, Cameron's intensity, his precision, the way he pushed performances and demanded authenticity. In many ways, Michael wasn't just stepping into a role. He was stepping into a responsibility, helping anchor the film at a moment when everything could have easily fallen apart. Sigourney Weaver would later reflect on what made Hicks so memorable, and it came down to what Michael Biehn brought to the role. He didn't play Hicks as a typical hardened soldier. Instead, he gave him a quiet sensitivity, an alpha male who was strong enough to follow a woman's lead without hesitation. Weaver said he handled it with such nuance that audiences couldn't help but fall for him. Off camera, his work ethic matched that depth. He was known as the hardest-working actor on set, never disappearing into his trailer, always present, always prepared. During filming, Michael formed a deep bond with Bill Paxton, who played the frantic Private Hudson, the character behind the film's unforgettable game over line. What started as on-screen chemistry quickly turned into a real friendship. They became like brothers, eventually working together on 5 films and spending nearly a year of their lives side by side on set. Paxton was the opposite of cynical, full of energy, endlessly positive, never speaking badly about anyone. So when he passed away unexpectedly in 2017 due to complications following heart surgery, the loss hit Michael hard. It wasn't just a colleague, it was one of his closest friends gone. When Aliens premiered in July 1986, the impact was undeniable. The film became both a commercial powerhouse and a critical triumph, earning over $180 million worldwide on an $18.5 million budget. It received 7 Academy Award nominations and won 2, cementing its place in cinematic history. Michael himself earned a Saturn Award nomination for Best Actor, and the studio even pushed, unsuccessfully, to secure him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. For a moment, everything aligned: talent, recognition, and momentum. And yet, as history would show, even that wasn't enough to guarantee a permanent place at the very top. By this point, Michael Biehn had carved out something rare in Hollywood, an action hero who could truly act. He didn't just play soldiers, he gave them weight, vulnerability, and emotional depth, elevating roles that might otherwise have been one-dimensional. After back-to-back successes with James Cameron, from The Terminator to Aliens, everything pointed to a defining moment. Critical acclaim, audience admiration, and proven box office success, it should have opened every door. Hollywood, by all logic, should have been lining up with offers, competing to cast him in their next major project. But the industry had other ideas. Instead of expanding his range, it began to narrow it. Michael wasn't being seen as a versatile actor, he was being labeled, placed into a specific mold that became harder and harder to escape. That pattern only deepened when he reunited with Cameron for a third time in 1989's The Abyss. This time, he played Lieutenant Hiram Coffey, a Navy SEAL unraveling under the psychological strain of deep-sea pressure. It was his third military role under Cameron, and once again, he delivered an intense, gripping performance that drew strong reviews. The recognition followed, at least to a point. Just like before, the studio pushed for him to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. And once again, it didn't happen. Despite the consistency of his performances and the growing respect for his craft, the pattern was becoming clear. Michael Biehn was earning praise, but not the kind of recognition or opportunities that could break him out of the box Hollywood had placed him in. Once again, Michael Biehn was left without the nomination. By now, Hollywood thought it had him figured out. He was the intense, battle-hardened military figure in James Cameron films, the man you called when you needed strength, tension, and quiet authority. He excelled at it, arguably better than anyone, but that strength became a limitation. He was being typecast. And in Hollywood, that can quietly reshape a career. When an actor becomes strongly associated with one kind of role, especially in science fiction or genre films, the industry begins to see them as only that. Reliable, yes, but rarely considered for anything beyond it. It's a strange paradox. The very performances that prove your talent can also confine it. Michael had everything needed to follow the path of stars like Harrison Ford or Bruce Willis, actors who moved beyond action into broader leading man territory. But timing and circumstance played their part. Harrison Ford had the global phenomenon of Star Wars and the adventurous legacy of Raiders of the Lost Ark, roles that reached far beyond a single genre. Bruce Willis, meanwhile, became a household name through Die Hard, a film that redefined mainstream action and anchored him firmly in popular culture. Michael's resume told a different story. He had 3 outstanding collaborations with Cameron: The Terminator, Aliens, and The Abyss, but all within the science fiction space, and all echoing variations of the same archetype. To audiences, he was compelling. To the industry, he was specific. And then came a decision, one that would sting, and quietly shift the course of his career in a way few could have predicted. As James Cameron began developing his ambitious sci-fi epic Avatar, it seemed like the perfect opportunity for a reunion. There was a major role on the table: the ruthless antagonist, Colonel Miles Quaritch, and Michael Biehn was seriously considered. It could have marked their fourth collaboration, a continuation of a creative partnership that had already produced three powerful performances. But in the end, Cameron made a different choice. He decided that casting both Michael and Sigourney Weaver might evoke many memories of aliens, pulling audiences out of the new world he was trying to build. The role ultimately went to Stephen Lang instead. It was a quiet but telling moment. Michael had done everything right, delivering intensity, professionalism, and commitment across multiple films. Yet, the very familiarity that once worked in his favor had now become a drawback. The connection that helped define his strongest roles was now limiting his future opportunities. Cameron's films were always grounded in humanity beneath the spectacle, but this time, that human connection didn't extend to casting. Moving into the 1990s, Michael continued to work steadily, though the trajectory had shifted. In Navy SEALs, he once again played a Navy SEAL, a role that, by now, felt almost inescapable. Despite the visibility, he later described the experience as one of the worst of his career, though he never fully explained why. The following year, he appeared in K2, stepping away from combat roles to portray a climber attempting to conquer the world's second-highest peak. It showed glimpses of range, but the question lingered, was Hollywood willing to see it? Then in 1993, Michael Biehn stepped into one of the most memorable roles of his career, one that would remind audiences just how much range he truly had. In Tombstone, alongside Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp and Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, Michael transformed into Johnny Ringo, a character who was as refined as he was deadly. His performance carried a quiet menace, an unpredictable edge that made every scene feel charged. And when it came time for his final confrontation with Kilmer's Doc Holliday, the result was unforgettable, an iconic showdown that still stands as one of the film's defining moments. Behind the scenes, the energy was just as intense. Val Kilmer was known for being difficult, aloof, unpredictable, often doing things his own way. But when the cameras rolled and he faced Michael, something clicked. The tension between them felt real, almost palpable, elevating their scenes into something far beyond scripted dialogue. For Michael, Tombstone would later become his favorite project, alongside his role as Kyle Reese in The Terminator. It wasn't just another film, it was a chance to break the mold, to step away from the heroic soldier and embrace a darker, more complex character. The shift mattered. Playing a villain allowed him to showcase a different side of his talent, one that audiences hadn't fully seen before. And unlike his science fiction work, this was a classic Western, grounded, accessible, and appealing to a broader audience. The film earned $56 million and gradually became a cult classic, cementing its place in pop culture. Yet, even with its success and his standout performance, the same pattern persisted. Michael Biehn was respected, recognized, and consistently working, but the leap to the next level of stardom still remained just out of reach. By the mid-1990s, the reality had become difficult to ignore. Michael Biehn was no longer being positioned as the kind of leading man who could carry massive $100 million productions. In 1996, he appeared in The Rock, a high-profile action blockbuster starring Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage, directed by Michael Bay and produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, arguably the most powerful names in action filmmaking at the time. The film was a massive success, earning $335 million worldwide, making it the most commercially successful project Michael had ever been part of. But there was a catch. His role was small. He was listed far down the cast, with limited screen time. It wasn't the kind of role that builds a star. It was the kind that quietly reflects a shift already in motion. Gone were the days when he stood as a co-lead alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sigourney Weaver. Now, he was a supporting presence in someone else's blockbuster. And after The Rock, that pattern didn't change. He never again secured a major role in a big-budget Hollywood film. In many ways, that moment marked the closing of a door, the quiet end of his path to A-list stardom. So what happened? Why didn't Michael Biehn become the star he once seemed destined to be? The answer isn't simple, but one factor stands out immediately: timing. His biggest films, The Terminator, Aliens, and The Abyss, arrived just before the explosion of the action movie era in the 1990s. By the time Hollywood fully embraced that wave, the spotlight had already shifted, and the moment that might have propelled him to the very top had quietly passed. By the time high-octane hits like Speed, Die Hard with a Vengeance, and Face Slash-Off dominated theaters, Hollywood had already shifted its focus to a new generation of stars. Michael Biehn, despite his strong resume, was still closely tied to 1980s sci-fi action, a style that, by the mid-1990s, many in the industry viewed as yesterday's wave. The momentum had moved on, and with it, so had the spotlight. But timing wasn't the only factor. Michael also made deeply personal choices that set him apart from many of his peers. A working actor with integrity, a father who showed up for his kids, a man who survived his demons and came out the other side still standing. If you enjoyed learning about what really happened to Michael Biehn, please like and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories about your favorite stars.